Welcome, and thank you for tuning into the Lewis Center interviews. Today, our special guest is my friend and colleague, Sherry Dowlatshahi, who serves as the City of San Antonio's Chief Diplomacy and Protocol Officer. In her position, Sherry heads San Antonio's Global Engagement Division, overseeing the city's international business initiatives, advising San Antonio elected officials and executives on matters of international affairs, and leading the planning of visits to our great city by high-level foreign dignitaries and diplomatic corps. Among the many other responsibilities of her position is the management of San Antonio Sister Cities program. She works closely with Sister Cities International as well as community stakeholders on fostering and maintaining San Antonio's official relationships. Sherry also holds numerous leadership and advisory positions outside of her official capacity with the city. A couple of these positions I'll highlight are ones she holds with strategic partners of the University of the Incarnate Word. Sherry serves on the Board of Trustees of the World Affairs Council of San Antonio, is on the Executive Committee of the San Antonio-Mexico Friendship Council, and is an advisory member of the Asociación de Empresarios Mexicanos. I'll close out my introduction of Sherry with a word about the formal university education that has added to her broad worldview. Sherry completed her undergraduate and graduate education in the UK at the University of Westminster and the University of Cambridge. She also studied at Alexandria University in Egypt and the National Autonomous University of Mexico in Mexico City. Sherry, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you for inviting me. What an honor to be here with you.
You are most welcome. And you know, for my first question, I want to go back to where I ended my introduction. The fact that you've earned degrees from renowned universities in 3 different continents speaks of your worldly education and your vast international life experience. But your cross-border journeys began long before you embarked on your pursuit of higher education. Could you tell us a little bit about your earlier upbringing and how it began to prepare you for your academic and professional path?
Certainly. I myself am bicultural, binational in many ways. I grew up in a very mixed environment. I was born in Iran. My father was from Iran. My mother is from England. And, interestingly enough, my maternal language is English. Everyone assumes it's Farsi from Iran, but we spoke English at home. And I lived in Iran until I believe the 8th grade. I finished the 8th grade in Iran, and I went to a British international school. But in my early life, I was at an American kindergarten. So I went through the whole gamut: an American kindergarten, a Persian elementary school, a British international school. And that was really kind of a big part of my formative years before my mother moved us to England. Now, we moved. I think it's important to say that we moved in the 6 months before the Iranian Revolution took place in Iran. My mother, who is a British citizen, and she herself native of England, had decided that it was time to go back and move back. I'm sorry, my lights keep going off here.
That's okay. Give it the hand wave.
We call it sustainable offices.
That's
so
saving the city money, Sherry. I love it.
So, you'll be seeing me getting up and turning on the light every few minutes. But anyway, to go back to what I was saying, that was kind of the background that I grew up with. And then we moved to England. And I went into basically my high school years in a British high school system, very, very different from the American system in every way. And I completed what was the equivalent of high school in the UK, and then went on to do my undergraduate and graduate studies. Now, both my undergraduate and graduate were completed in England. What I did in Egypt and Mexico was my study abroad programs. So I was at those 2 universities during my undergraduate, which was actually on, it was foreign languages with international studies in the Middle East, actually the Arab world, and Latin America. So that was kind of my focus. That's what I did at undergrad. I loved languages. absolutely loved learning languages, and with that, of course, I loved culture and foreign cultures. And so, growing up again, I when I lived in Iran, I started learning French, and so that became a third language that I had access to. I was already speaking Farsi and English at home. And then when I moved to England, I started to learn Spanish. And so the Spanish, of course, that I was learning and in school all the way through university was with teachers from Spain, and my accent was very Castellano. And then I went to Mexico for my study abroad, and that's when my accent completely changed. After 6 months, 8 months of living in Mexico, I came back with a completely Mexican accent, and I remember my teachers, my professors at university were so surprised at how I completely switched and pivoted. But that really kind of cemented my love for Latin America and Mexico, just that whole experience of being in Mexico. And before that, I had been in Egypt. And I'll be really honest with you, Raphael, I was convinced that I was going to graduate from university and I was going to be moving to one of the Arab countries and working in either kind of the financial services industry, or I was going to go to the United Nations and work as an interpreter in the United Nations. I mean, I literally, that's where I was, that's where my mind was. And moving to the Americas was never part of my life plan, and it just happened. And so years later, spin forward, I moved from Mexico. I met my then husband in Mexico. And so when I moved back to England, a year later, I ended up marrying and then eventually moving to Mexico as a young bride. And I think that move to Mexico kind of initiated my whole life here on the Americas. And for the next, I would say, for pretty much most of my adult life, because I was very young when I came to Mexico as a young married woman. But after that, I've lived in Mexico and the United States, kind of pretty much interchangeably in between both countries.
Yeah, well, let me just, if I may, your Spanish is so great, Sherry, that when I think when you're in the circles with a lot of Spanish speakers, obviously in the city of San Antonio and some of the organizations that we both belong to, your Spanish is just excellent. And so I think people wonder, like, well, where is this woman from? She speaks with a bit of a British accent when she speaks English. Her last name is Dowlatshahi. She speaks perfect Spanish, and they don't even know that you speak French. And now, do you speak Arabic as well?
So yes, well, I can't say I speak it anymore. I obviously studied Arabic at university. I have
Yeah.
4 years of Arabic, went to Egypt, and my Arabic was pretty good. But I
Wow.
haven't used my Arabic in so long. And I think, one of the things with languages is if you don't use them, you lose them.
Yeah.
And even my French is rusty. I mean, I used to be a really good French speaker, and I can hold a conversation, but I cannot speak at the level I used to because I just don't use the language. And I'll be honest with you, Rafael, I really do believe that Spanish is my second language. It's the language that for so many years was a language I did speak at home within the family context, and then of course I worked in a Mexican university, the UNAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico. I worked there in Mexico City for about 6 months at their school for foreign students. And then I came to San Antonio and I worked in the San Antonio campus of the UNAM for 13 years. And working at the UNAM in San Antonio was like working in a little island of Mexico in the United States. And so every day, everything was in Spanish. I mean, I was completely surrounded by Spanish speakers. So Spanish was, very, very, just a daily form of communication. And so I can honestly tell you today, it's English is my first language and Spanish is my second, and then the other languages come after that. And it just goes back to it's what you use and what you're communicating with on a regular basis.
Sure. Well, it doesn't surprise me at all to hear you say that you feel Spanish is your second language, and then just the little subtleties of cultural competence that are very clear when you're in the circles, and as someone who has it's just part of who you are now. It's part of your culture. That's
Thank you.
so. As much as anyone in San Antonio, Sherry, first of all, let me say, you didn't plan to be here, but we're so fortunate to have you, and life takes us down different paths, right? And brought you here, and it was a wonderful thing that it brought you. As much as anyone in San Antonio, you have an exceptionally informed perspective of the international and intercultural dimension of our special culture, identity, and economy here in San Antonio. And I want to ask you, how will this internationality, this interculturality, help position San Antonio even more prominently as one of the great urban and metropolitan centers of the Americas in the coming decade?
Well, I'll tell you something. I have to start with, I love San Antonio. I mean, and I'm going to also tell you something else, which I sometimes I forget and people don't realize. I have lived longer in San Antonio than any other place in my life. I've lived here twice now, so I've had two perspectives. While the first time I lived in San Antonio, um, here we go again, sustainability.
Saving money, Sherry. You're saving money.
So the first time I was here, I was working within the context of a Mexican institution, a guest institution in this country, promoting language and culture of Mexico and those relationships, and working definitely with the San Antonio community. And that did that for 14 years, different roles that I had. But that was the perspective I came from. And it was the years during when the NAFTA agreement was signed, and so there's a lot of excitement around what the NAFTA meant and what it meant for San Antonio and trade. And then we had the Splendors of Mexico exhibition at the San Antonio Museum of Art. So the importance of culture and how you interwove culture and the business and the trade and how it all helped again go towards the same end, which was to kind of elevate Mexico as a modern country that was entering into this trade agreement with Canada and the United States. And so I went back to Mexico. I lived in Mexico, and I then came back to San Antonio, and I've lived here now for the last 14 years. And I came back in a very different role. I was now working for the city of San Antonio, a public administration employee, and in a reverse role, promoting San Antonio to the world. And I would say that the San Antonio that I encountered the very first time I came in 1987 is a very different San Antonio to the one I encountered when I moved back in 2001. Just two totally different cities. Still many of the same places that were there, of course, a lot of the same things, but there was this subtle change, and you could really feel it. And one of those things that I felt was back in 1987, I could really say that I felt that San Antonio was very bicultural, bilingual city. Yes, it was very international, really was mostly Mexico. And there were things happening, of course, but it was still very much identified as that bicultural, bilingual city. And today, and when I came back in 2011, the city that I found is a very international city. Some people have a hard time thinking of San Antonio as an international city, and I tell you, through the work that we do here in the Global Engagement Office, which is the front door for international relations for the city of San Antonio, we see so much international engagement, and not just groups and engagement with the city government, but also within our community, within our, say, our higher education sector, with business. And truly it's San Antonio is a different city. And so that comes back to your question, that whole intercultural play. We obviously have to also then, as a city, we are a very welcoming city where we are very inclusive. And I think that at the city government level, there's been a lot of effort and a lot of positive steps forward in trying to kind of show that inclusivity. So, to give you an example, a few years ago, there was an Office of Language Access created, and that Language Access Office didn't exist before. And before that, there was funding set aside in the budget to make sure that all city council meetings had Spanish language translation. So anybody listening to a city council meeting, either live at the council or if they were plugging in through the television, they could switch to Spanish if they wanted to hear it in Spanish. And that didn't happen before. And now through the Language Access Office, they're looking at how do they make the information that the city has and puts out about its services available in multiple languages in our community? How are we working in an inclusive way to reach all the residents? Because this is a city that has to serve many different residents from many different cultural backgrounds. Everybody has a different story. I think recently I heard a statistic that more than 220,000 residents of San Antonio were born outside the United States. So, a large percentage of our population here are immigrants. And so what comes with that, they bring with them, of course, their diverse cultures and languages. But it's also incumbent on us as a community to also be able to be prepared, to communicate appropriately, and to also have the intercultural skill set when it's necessary to be able to handle situations that come up, whether it's on the cultural, education, business side. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear your perspective on that evolution of the city since 1987 when you were first here, and then you mentioned higher ed in your answer, but higher ed's another area which I imagine you've seen the tremendous evolution of our great universities here in San Antonio. And Sherry, I want to commend you for the way you consistently include our city's universities and colleges in the city's international initiatives and planning. You seem to be very intentional about that. And I want to ask you, what compels you to include us, the universities and colleges, the way you do?
Thank you for the question. So I worked in, I would say, international education for 25 plus years. Okay. Again, one of those accidental things. I didn't plan to go into education as a career or anything. It just happened. And I have to say, some of my best memories I worked in higher education. I also worked in K-12. But in all those situations, I was working in the international context, whether it was working in an international school, working in a foreign university in another country. It was always within the international framework and context, which allowed me to then interact with students from different parts of the world, as well as faculty and fellow colleagues. And so I have a love and passion for education. I'll just start with that. But also, really and realistically, education is a pathway. It's a pathway for our community to also grow our sense of international and our globalism. Number one, we have an amazing higher education ecosystem in San Antonio. But I would say it's a great secret to the world. So we go out into the world, and it's part of our work here at the Global Engagement. And, very often we're there promoting San Antonio. We don't just promote business, we promote, tourism, business, we're all doing it. We're all ambassadors of San Antonio. When we leave San Antonio and go out into the world, Rafael, when you've traveled, you do that too. And so, as part of what we promote about San Antonio, we promote our amazing higher education assets. These great universities and colleges we have, all the accolades that a lot of our colleges and universities are receiving, and it's all about, how do we raise the profile and attract more foreign students to our city. Those foreign students, at the end of the day, if we want to translate it into business, they are actually, it's the students are an export, foreign students, in terms of educational services are an export classified by the U.S. Department of Commerce. So every international student comes to our city, right? We're importing these students. It's good for our economy. Each student represents, but then going to further, those students are also representative of future talent that we can have in our city who can join the ranks of our residents and become future residents of San Antonio and contribute to growing our city and our economy and the diversity and richness. And each student, an international student, they bring the world with them when they come to study at our colleges and universities. So they help our universities and our local students to be more internationalized by exactly those exchanges that happen. So gosh, the benefits, right, of international student recruitment, the benefits of recruiting faculty and researchers from all over the world, all of that to say that it's important. It's important to promote our higher education assets. And it's really important for us to tell the world about San Antonio and why it's a great place to come and study, live here and work here. And so we do that in our small way, because it is a small way, but it's all of us contributing in the same way to get to the same end point, and that is to raise the profile of San Antonio. So education, yes, is a pathway. The second part is that as part of our Sister Cities program and our program of official relationships, one of those pillars in these kind of to have successful exchanges of programs is education, is youth engagement. And so very often we look at our universities and we see if there's opportunities for some of our colleges and universities to have collaborations with colleges and universities in our sister cities or friendship cities, or when we're cultivating new relationships. Very often the first thing we look at is where are there synergies on the education side? What are we good at that maybe is something we share in common with this other city, that maybe on the education side there could be an alignment. So whenever we are planning and we're looking at building new relationships, our education partners here locally are an important strategic member of our group. And we love collaborating with all of our higher education partners in San Antonio. We love collaborating with organizations that promote actively internationalization of our youth, and especially even at the K-12 level. We have an international school now in San Antonio. Who would have thought? The International School of San Antonio is a small school. They're just starting out, but they're there. They weren't there 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. And we have magnet schools like the International School of the Americas with, I believe, Northeast Independent School District. And so there are these great schools and great programs that we have around the city. And we just have to become stronger. And of course, here at the Incarnate Word, you have St. Anthony's, you have University of Incarnate Word High School. Your schools have been involved with our sister city in Japan. There have been more than 20 years of active exchanges of high school students between those schools and our sister city in Kumamoto. And UIW has had an amazing international outlook, opening schools around the world. I mean, the alignment is just phenomenal, but it also represents opportunity and the potential to develop not only the young minds, but also people like us, the faculty and administrators who are involved as well.
Well, we benefit from your work, Sherry, needless to say, and you know that indeed we're invested in the internationalization of our curriculum. You know, our two campuses in Mexico that we have, which I think really differentiates us, and then recruiting international students to come here. I mean, that is really enriches who we are. And you know, we try to send as many students abroad as possible, but many students, they for whatever reason, they can't study abroad. But having the international students come here, it really enriches us so much and helps our students for that interconnected global society in which they're going to have to operate more and more. So thank you for all you do. Cherry, you're everywhere. You do so much, and I know a little bit about your schedule and the life you lead, because I see you. You are everywhere, and I suspect that you have much of your calendar already figured out for the coming year. I just know busy people like yourself plan way ahead. And do you want to share with us some of the, maybe a couple of highlights of some of the important events and projects that you have scheduled ahead that you feel would be of interest to our audience?
Yes, well, we got a busy year next year. Actually, the first part of the year is going to be really busy. We're planning to go to Colombia with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We know that there's our San Antonio Spurs are going to play in Paris, in France. Excuse me about that again. And there's going to be, business delegations going out to engage in France and use the opportunity. We're looking at going to the Philippines, where we have our sister city there, and we're building a San Antonio garden within their botanical garden. So that's a really big, wonderful project that we're collaborating with our sister city Baguio. We're looking at kind of going to Spain, to the Canary Islands, where we have two sister cities. And potentially, we'd like to look at opening up a new relationship within Lanzarote, with another of the Canary Islands. We're looking at receiving a number of delegations, important delegations. There'll be a delegation from Querétaro, with maybe led by the governor of Querétaro and the mayor of the city of Querétaro. Again, very much a follow-up of what has just happened, that wonderful cultural project, Al Otro Lado del Espejo, that opened up in Querétaro in September. We anticipate a delegation from Quebec City, Canada. And in fact, it's going to, the mayor of Quebec City, who is the chair of the Organization of World Heritage Cities, is coming to San Antonio. And so there will be a meeting, but there will also be activities for our Quebec City friends. We also anticipate a delegation from our sister city in Korea, Gwangju. The mayor of Gwangju is coming during Dream Week. And all of that is happening kind of in the first 3 months. I'll say that one of the projects that we do know is kind of further on in September, which we're also working towards. There's going to be a US-Japan summit organized by Sister Cities International in Japan, in the city of Isumisano, which is right there in the Osaka prefecture, where the World Fair is taking place. So we want to take a delegation, a San Antonio delegation, and be at the summit and support, because we have this wonderful sister city relationship with Kumamoto. And so sister city engagement is always on top of our mind. We're always looking at what are we doing with our sister cities, our friendship cities, and what kind of initiatives can we embark on and engage with. So a lot of project-based activities that, were very intentionally thought out, but not necessarily kind of routine activities. So every year something different comes up. We're working on collaboration around the theme of water and river management with the city of Chennai. There's some conversations of doing best practices exchange with Windhoek in Namibia. So continuing to keep those sister city programs active and going, and in a short in a summarized way, to tell you that, we want that program ultimately to benefit, right, our community through all these engagements that we facilitate. All of that's going to keep us busy next year.
I can imagine, Sherry. And in your answer, you mentioned the Philippines, and I do want to just reminded me we can't end this interview without giving a shout out to the wonderful Mayor Ron Nierenberg, who just embodies, I think, our internationality and our interculturality. And I know he's coming to the end of his term, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he has ahead as a leader for our communities here in Texas. But beyond that, he's just a terrific leader, and really someone who just, it's who he is. He is international. He's intercultural, and I know you're going to miss him.
I'll tell you that he has been a tremendous champion of international engagement for San Antonio. We can't say it enough. We've had some wonderful mayors who really in the past supported the San Antonio's internationalization in many ways. Mayor Nierenberg has just been amazing in the last 8 years. What he has done, he chaired Sister Cities International for 2 years. Currently, he is sitting on the boards of the Mayor's Migration Council, which is an international NGO. He's the only U.S. mayor on there. He's also just joined the board of the Organization of World Heritage Cities, again, the only U.S. mayor on there. He believes, he really does believe in the power of international engagement and what we could be doing and how it helps San Antonio in terms of the benefits that we derive. And very often the first thing people think of is like investments and trade that obviously have those great economic benefits, but it's also the people-to-people engagement that is so important, that helps us all be better in so many ways when we understand people and cultures from all around the world, and that we embody that in our value system as a city. And so in that sense, Mayor Nierenberg has really done an amazing job leading San Antonio in terms of our international initiatives.
Well, we're gonna miss him, Sherry, but you are going to be carrying that torch of internationalization. Really looking forward to working with you in the coming year. I will see you once more at least before the end of the calendar year. I know we have a meeting of the City of San Antonio Latin America Engagement Task Force. I look forward to being there. And thank you so much, Sherry, for taking time out of your very busy schedule for this interview. It's a privilege to be your friend and colleague, and I look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rafael, for inviting me to be on this program with you today. I enjoyed our conversation.
You're welcome, Sherry. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.